Now let's take a look back at the life and legacy of the former Vice President Dick Cheney.
So help me God. Congratulations, Mr. President.
He was one of the most polarizing political figures in recent memory, a hero and patriot to conservatives, a villain to liberals. Serving under 4 different presidents, in his last job, Dick Cheney became arguably the most influential vice president in American history. He was born in Lincoln, Nebraska, January of 1941, into a family of 5 that would establish strong roots in Wyoming during Dick's high school years. After Cheney flunked out of Yale, as he would put it, he finished both a bachelor's and master's degree in political science at the University of Wyoming. But before he finished his doctorate at the University of Wisconsin, Cheney won a Capitol Hill Fellowship and headed to Washington with his new bride, Lynn Vincent, on his arm. It wasn't long before former Illinois Congressman Donald Rumsfeld would recruit Cheney to work in the Nixon administration. Cheney quickly rose in the ranks following Rumsfeld to the White House as deputy counsel. Then at 34 years old, he became President Gerald Ford's chief of staff.
I watched him in summit meetings, during intense discussions in the cabinet room and the Situation Room, and throughout the exhausting, gallant effort of the 1976 campaign.
After serving as campaign manager for Ford's failed re-election bid, Cheney went home to Wyoming. He returned to Washington in 1978 as the representative from the Equality State, winning re-election 5 times and making his name as a no-nonsense ultra-conservative who fought fair but ruthlessly.
The notion that somehow I was sort of out of sync or out of step with the party simply isn't true.
In 1989, Cheney was named Secretary of Defense by President George H.W. Bush. While Cheney essentially had no military experience and 5 draft deferments during Vietnam, he relished the opportunity to run the Pentagon. It was Cheney who pushed hard for aggressive action against Iraq when Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait in 1990.
When war came, America was ready, and Secretary Cheney's leadership contributed enormously to the victory.
But following combat operations, there was constant debate as to whether President George H.W. Bush and Defense Secretary Cheney pulled out U.S. troops too soon.
How many additional American lives is Saddam Hussein worth? The answer, not very damn many.
Cheney left the White House in 1992 when Bill Clinton defeated President Bush, but he remained relevant as a Republican voice, choosing to stay in the private sector. Cheney nearly doubled revenues at energy heavyweight Halliburton as the company's CEO, but later during the Second Iraq War, questions of transparency and favoritism involving that company filled news stories and sparked hearings on Capitol Hill. Cheney resigned from Halliburton when he became the vice presidential candidate alongside George W. Bush in 2000. Cheney actually ran the search for a vice president for George Bush, but in the end, Bush chose Cheney for the job. In one of the most arduous and complicated elections ever, Bush and Cheney defeated Al Gore and running mate Joe Lieberman when the U.S. Supreme Court ruled 5 weeks after the election to cease recounts in Florida.
We will always understand the pain of their families, and our nation will forever look with reverence upon their place, this place where their lives ended.
Cheney's leadership was put to the test less than a year later, 9/11. With America under attack and President Bush in Florida, the vice president was forced into the White House bunker, taking the lead in Washington, helping make the call to shoot down any aircraft deemed a threat in American airspace. Vice President Cheney was a key player in the White House's War on Terror campaign, in the prism of post-9/11 and after unheeded warnings to Iraq's leader Saddam Hussein, President Bush ordered the launch of Operation Iraqi Freedom in 2003.
6 in 10 Americans say they feel it was a mistake to go to war. What do you say to those people?
We were elected to do a job and to do what we think is right for the country.
The Bush White House had asserted that Iraq had weapons of mass destruction, a claim many of those officials would later retract when the weapons were never found. Bush and Cheney won re-election against Senators John Kerry and John Edwards. In 2005, Cheney found himself at the heart of the CIA leak scandal involving operative Valerie Plame. His chief of staff, Scooter Libby, was charged with lying to FBI investigators in the investigation, of whom released Plame's name to a journalist as possible retribution for criticism of Iraq policy by Plame's ambassador husband. Vice President Cheney was never charged in connection with the leak, and 2 civil suits against him were dismissed. In 2006, Vice President Cheney accidentally shot his friend, Henry Whittington, in the face, neck, and torso with pellets during a quail hunting trip. Whittington suffered a minor heart attack and spent 6 days in the hospital.
You can't blame anybody else. I'm the guy who pulled the trigger and shot my friend.
Cheney ended his second term as one of the least popular politicians in American history. Still, he remained outspoken, taking the Obama administration to task on national security issues like the proposed closing of Guantanamo Bay Detention Center and the use of enhanced interrogation techniques against detainees. By 2010, Dick Cheney had survived 5 heart attacks. In 2012, Cheney underwent a heart transplant. His doctor pronounced him healthy and gave him at least another decade to live. Time Cheney used to continue as an outspoken foreign policy hawk in Washington. Cheney confronted Vice President Mike Pence at a conservative retreat, questioning President Trump's tactics on NATO and North Korea. Cheney's daughter Liz continued the vice president's legacy in Congress, winning her father's old seat in 2017 and moving up the ranks of GOP leadership with her still influential father looking on. But after Liz's continued vocal criticism of President Donald Trump, the Republican Party closed ranks and she lost her re-election bid.
Lynn and I are so proud of Liz for standing up for the truth, doing what's right.
Dick Cheney was typecast as aloof and accused of being calculating and deceptive. Friends called him quietly funny and dry, but determined. As defense secretary and then arguably the most powerful vice president in the history of the republic, Cheney helped lead the country through 3 wars and the worst attack on the U.S. homeland. In Washington, Bret Baier, Fox News.
I'm Steve Ducey.
I'm Brian Kilmeade.
And I'm Ainsley Earhart. And click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis.